Hey, dude. I mean, it's really nice to have you, on screen where I feel like this time getting to talk to you, and this is not at all a dig, I have more of your attention than last time because you were busy.
When I was in Auburn, you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a whirlwind of a weekend, man. It was cool, though, because I was busy, but I was busy doing a bunch of stuff I love to do, right? I was doing shows all through Alabama. I got to play on the alumni water polo team. I got to hang out with the friends. I got to go eat some barbecue at Byron's and go hit Mama Goldberg's and Willie's Wings and just a bunch of nostalgic stuff. I had some family come over and I gave my nephew a tour of Auburn's campus, even though Auburn's campus is completely different now. I didn't recognize anything, but it was an awesome weekend. But yes, it was a whirlwind and it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I was keeping up with what you were doing as you were kind of, because you were posting on your story a lot. I could tell you were excited to be in town. And man, before I could even ask, you just name dropped all the places in Auburn that you love name dropping.
Yeah. I mean, it's easy. Those are the spots. I'm trying to find, where is it? I have a little, I don't know where. It's normally right here on my desk. I have a little, replica of Byron's Smokehouse, the original one, the original location that someone made me for a graduation gift. And so Byron's Smokehouse always sits right here on my desk. And then I got this over here. It's not up on the wall right now, but this is a sketch of Toomer's Corner.
Yeah.
So yeah, man, Auburn, of course, dude. When I get to go back, man, I don't get to go back very often. So it's nostalgic.
Yeah. It was nice getting to meet you in person whenever you were in town, getting to, film some water polo stuff. That was my first time getting to see water polo. And I've heard you talk about it for a long time. And you do a good job of hyping it up and making it sound like something I should go check out. But what's funny is I've heard you enough on like podcasts and stuff talk about the cringy joke that everybody makes about like, well, how do you keep the horses from drowning and all that? And honestly, I like now whenever I hear like, you talk about it on a podcast or something, I like cringe for you because I'm like, this does sound like it would be an annoying joke to hear over and over.
So when I first started getting that a lot was when I was at Auburn. And I was like, captain of the team and had to come up with all this fundraising and stuff. And we, one of our buddies, it was like something out of a Saved by the Bell episode or whatever. One of our buddies was like, yo, I got this in on these seat cushions. And so we could buy them for really cheap and then resell them. And we're like, all right, let's do it. So we took all our money and bought like $500 worth of seat cushions. And we're like, we're going to flip them and like make twice as much money, right? Well, they show up in bulk and they were like the cheapest, dumbest thing. They were like not even comfortable. They were like foam that were cut out into AU and it wasn't even the right shade of blue. It was like Gator colors more than it was Auburn colors. So I'm like, dude, every game day, you guys, we got into this pickle. Every game day, instead of going and tailgating and getting hammered and cooking barbecue and sleeping in and having fun, we're gonna sell all these. We got to go sell at least 20 of these every game day before we go in. So that's what we did. We go around to all the tailgaters because college kids don't have money, so you had to go over to the RVs where the alumni were there, right? And we'd be like, "Oh, we're raising money for the Auburn water polo team," and those are the guys are always because it was a Jeff Foxworthy joke, so they all had it in their head, and they're like, "Water polo team." How y'all keep the horses from drowning? And we're like, oh, good one. Oh, I don't remember that one before. $20,
Yeah, man, I've worked in customer service, like in bars and restaurants and all that for a few years now. And I've gotten real good at laughing at really unfunny jokes.
Yeah, try being a comedian. After every show, there's a line of people and they're like, yeah, I got one for you. You can steal this if you want. I'm like, probably won't.
That's pretty funny. But yeah, I'm trying to think of where, let me look at my notes here for just a second. I thought this was funny, maybe a funny little, anecdote or thing to kind of bring up. You and I first started corresponding sometime in 2021, I believe, probably like August or something like that. And A few months ago, you and Forrest on the Mermen had an episode of the Mermen where you told the story of you meeting Tim Cook.
Yeah.
And I'm just gonna make a comparison here. I felt similarly when I first was like, I'm gonna take a shot in the dark. I probably had been drinking, similar to your story, and was like, oh man, like, yeah, I really would love to, connect with Dave at some point because, it's really cool to see Auburn grads doing stuff, being really successful in the kind of areas that I'm interested in, which is, I love comedy, music, podcasting. So it's really cool to see that you're doing as well as you are. And so like reaching out to you was really cool that you emailed me back, within probably 24 hours. And I was like, I went to my wife, I probably woke her up or something in the middle of the night, was like, babe, Dave Williamson responded to my email. And she was just like, wait, really? That's awesome. And so anyway, it's, thank you for being, willing to at least, I guess my whole point is you could have just left that in your junk folder, spam folder, or whatever, or whatever happened. But thank you for responding and, making this effort and everything.
Yeah, no, you got it, man. I mean, look, the key is that a lot of people reach out asking for something and you are reaching out offering something, and you were, anytime someone says they're an Auburn grad, I mean, you always want to support each other. And you're like, hey man, I'm an Auburn dude, and I appreciate what you're doing, and I just want to know if you ever need video or photography, then I can be a service, right? And I always try to write people back within 24 hours, because if I don't, I'll never remember. It just gets buried. And then people are like, oh, guys, but the bar is set much lower for you reaching out to me than me trying to get a response from Tim Cook. And I did, the story you're talking about is during the pandemic, I was drinking a bottle of wine one night watching Netflix by myself. And I don't remember why I did this or what, but I just messaged, I looked online and Tim Cook's email was online. So I just emailed him and I said, hey man, thanks for being a strong Auburn man. He had said some stuff publicly about a lot of the social unrest that was going on at the time. And I was like, hey, thanks for just speaking up, And then he wrote me back and wrote, thanks, Dave, War Eagle. And I was like, maybe it's him. Maybe it's his secretary. Yeah. I don't know. But then I wrote back immediately, if you ever want to have a comedy special on Apple TV, blah, blah, then all of a sudden I was asking for something. But then I went to the Iron Bowl with my brought my sons and my wife and my nephew who's looking at Auburn to go now, and I got sideline passes thanks to my buddy. And we were down there and Tim Cook was right there. And I just kind of like slid over and I was like, hey, Tim, how are you? And I was like, I said the same thing you just said. I said, Tim, I just want to say I emailed you during the pandemic. I thought it was really cool. You emailed me back. War Eagle, thanks for being a great Auburn man. And he was like, yeah, of course. And then I'm like, can I take a picture? And he's like, all right.
Well, that's the funny thing. After you were in Auburn at the end of January and I saw you perform and everything, I realized after the whole thing, I was like, I probably should have gotten a picture with Dave, because it was cool to meet you, but I'm just not that type of person, because no matter who I'm meeting, I'm like, it feels awkward to me to be the type of person that's like, it feels kind of, and I'm not disparaging anyone, but I just feel kind of clout chasey in that way. And I don't like to be that person. So,
It's tough, man. Especially if you're trying to do things in this industry, then you're not really trying to be a fan. You're trying to be a peer. So I blame it on my kids now. When I meet somebody that I want a picture with, I go, hey man, my kids are a big fan. Can I take a picture with you? They're not going to believe it, I don't want it, but my kids will think it's cool. And then people are like,
that's
yeah,
funny.
Of course.
See, it's hard for me. It's hard for me because my son is only one. So unless I'm meeting Bluey or someone like that, unless I'm meeting an animated character, it's a little bit harder for me.
Oh, you got to blame it on a buddy then. Oh man, my buddy's a huge fan, dude. Is it cool if I just, he'll lose his mind if I just send him this photo right now,
Yeah, that's fun. But yeah, I just wanted to make that comparison, kind of like tongue in cheek or halfway joking, just because it's just funny. When I heard you telling that story, I was like, this is about the level of excitement I had when Dave emailed me back. So, and speaking of that, it was funny. I just think this story should be told on a podcast. I don't know. I think it's funny that you and I had been corresponding for a couple years or a year and a half or so. And then the first time I was ever going to meet you in person was at the water polo game that you were playing that I was going to film.
I was wearing a Speedo.
Well, no, I was going to say what was funny was I remember like walking in. I'd never been in the aquatic center. And so I was kind of like, I have no idea where I'm going. I probably walked around like the whole place just being like, the outside being like, where do I go in? But then I remember walking in, I finally like saw you. You were like the last person I finally saw. And as I was walking up, you were wrapping a towel around yourself to like pretty much a way to like hide yourself changing into a Speedo. And I walked up and I was like, Dave, hey, I'm Peter. This might not be the best time to, meet you. And I think you said something like, this is actually the perfect time.
It's called deck changing. You wrap a towel around you and then drop your pants and then pull your Speedo up, and you just be really careful not to drop your towel during the process. It's happened before, trust me. But yeah, that is perfect timing. Absolutely. We're friends forever because of that.
But yeah, it was really fun getting to watch some water polo. And I wanted to kind of ask you, because I don't think that, if I'm not mistaken, from what I've heard you kind of talk about, you don't really get as many opportunities to play water polo these days because you mostly coach, right?
Yeah, I coach. I'm an assistant coach at the high school here just because I'm super passionate about it. And I love coaching. I love the sport. And now my son plays on the team. He's a sophomore. So, for 20 years, more often than not, I've been coaching somewhere in some way, other people's kids. And it's just really cool that now I get to put time and energy and passion into creating cool experiences for my son, because it's the best, man. And a lot of reason why I do it is because I didn't have those I just didn't know that those opportunities existed when I was a kid. So there's nothing better than playing a team sport and getting to go do training trips or accomplishing goals together and playing in cool tournaments and doing stuff like that. So I've been coaching for 20 years just to have the experience and knowledge to put my kid in position now to have really cool experiences.
That's awesome. And I mean, you live in a part of the country that it seems like water polo is a bigger thing there than most places. Like, I mean, I don't even know a place in Alabama where you can really play it except for maybe like a very wealthy neighborhood or something.
Yeah, it's growing, man. They have some in Huntsville. They have some programs where they're trying to, get younger guys into it. And Atlanta, actually, it's grown a lot. But yeah, it's definitely it's a big thing. It's as big as football out here. It's like this is water polo mecca out in LA. And LA is mecca for water polo and comedy. So, when we had to move to go either to New York or LA, I looked at my wife and was like, LA be pretty cool. So we got a lot of good water polo, high level water polo out here. But yeah, I don't get to play obviously because I just don't have the time. Like, I played through most of my 20s on masters teams and stuff. And now I'm on the road. Like my attention and all my time goes into, trying to further my career, really. So I still like playing. I'd rather get in and play a pickup game of water polo than a pickup game of basketball and blow my knee out, But I also don't like being the weakest link. I like being, when I worked hard at it, I feel like I was usually the best or one of the best guys in the pool at whatever level I was at. And then out here, it's just like I get in, and these dudes are good. and I'm out there just like, man, I'm the worst guy in the pool right now. So it was fun to go back and play in that tournament, play with some other old guys and, play against some young kids too, where we could maybe not be as in shape, but be a little smarter and kind of, score some goals. I had a couple goals that my nephew got to see me score that were nice goals. And man, I wish you were filming the next day, because the next day I scored this one backhand where it was just kind of like half skill, half luck.
Yeah.
It hit the bar, went in. It looked real cool. It's where you hear the whole pool go, ooh.
Yeah.
I wish I had that on video to prove I did that.
Yeah, I think some of the coolest points that I saw were ones where someone would just kind of toss it over their head and it went in, and I was like, that's hard to beat right there. That's just good game,
Yeah, when something cool happens, it's really cool in that sport, man, for sure. And, it's just so neat for me, too. I played so many games in that pool when I was in college. It's just cool to go back and kind of get some of those same feelings back and remember some of the stuff and tell stories. I was the oldest guy there by far. There was not. And then the referee, like, you know, I'd make a big move where I turned a guy and I'd inside water and went to go make a move. And then they steal the ball back from me. And I'm looking at the ref like, you gotta reward me for that move, right? And then the refs are my friends, so I could ball bust them. But the refs are like, no, we got to finish the move. I go, yeah, normally. I go, but I'm 20 years older than the kid I just spun. Like help a brother out, man. Like, you know? I get it if I'm like an 18-year-old kid and you're trying to make me work for the call and do it the right way and push me to be better. But I go, I had to dig really deep for that move, man. Like, you know, it's like if a 44-year-old dude goes up to dunk on somebody and there's a lot of contact and the dunk doesn't quite go in. Give him the foul, man. Let him go shoot free throws. That was hard work for that guy to get up there and dunk it.
It seems like in general, being active is like a big part of your personality and everything, because I mean, there's plenty of people who, as they get older, really just, I mean, like even me, I'm 29 and I feel like I'm so much less like active in my life and everything. And I feel like, you know, as you have kids, it gets harder to, but I don't know. I feel like there's a sense from you that I really like where it seems like you're just really into like having fun and finding ways to have fun, but also, you know, be active and get your exercise and that kind of thing.
Well, you're in the toughest part of life for that, man, because you're at a point in life where you're just starting to lose your metabolism, like up all the way through. And when you got your first kid and they're young, all of a sudden, like, you know, you're used to being able to juggle everything and still get up and go to the gym in the morning, or, you know, and it just, your time gets sucked by the baby. You're not sleeping good.
Yeah.
You know, there's just a lot of contributing factors where it gets tough when you're about your phase of life. But yeah, like for me, man, I'm not the kind of guy who can religiously go to the gym or go on jogs. So I got to find ways to get active, whether it's getting in the pool and playing with the water polo team while I'm coaching them, or meeting my buddy down by the beach and doing an ocean swim, or when we're on tour with Bird, he likes to go play disc golf, or going for walks with my wife and my dog. Like I got to find ways to stay active because I just don't have the discipline or the attention span to really get into a gym every day. Although when you're in the hotels a lot, I have started building the habit of going down to the hotel gym and getting on like the elliptical and doing some stuff. But I was getting fat the last tour I did with Bert, man. We were gone so much and we were, you know, eating good food and just on the road for so long and drinking beers, and it started catching up to me. So I had to, we did this hike up in Vancouver called the Grouse Grinder. And it was one of those moments where I felt like the weak link again. I was like, man, it's taken us so long to do this like really steep hike. I don't think we're going to have time to finish it because we got to get back to the venue for the show. And I was the one slowing everyone down. And my back was hurting. And I'm like, I got to lose 20 pounds, dude. So I did.
Well, congratulations. I mean, that's it's hard to do, especially like you said, when you're on tour all the time. And it's, well, actually, and this kind of brings up a whole thing I wanted to talk about. How long, I mean, from like, if I'm kind of looking at your career over the past, you know, 10 to 12 years or so, like, you know, looking at like your comedy from your first album all the way through stuff I've seen you do more recently, it's only been maybe like 5 to 8 years that barbecue and like food and cooking has been like a real big part of your kind of comedy personality, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I got really into it maybe 6 or 7 years ago. So, you know, the whole like telling jokes about or stories about, because you talk about what's going on in your life, right? So my kids are teenagers now. So, I mean, I've been doing stories about, you know, having a family and being a dad for quite a while. And I think that barbecue lends itself to that persona. It makes sense, right?
Oh, yeah.
And I've always been a real big, I've been passionate about eating good barbecue, you know, starting there at Auburn at Byron Smokehouse, man. I'm telling you, I go every other day. I'm not exaggerating.
It's my favorite barbecue place in Auburn. I really love it. It's awesome.
It's so good, dude. And and Glenn, the owner there is just great. The whole family's good people. It's just a great spot. So I would go to like Texas, and I lived in North Carolina for a while, and just traveling all over the country. And it was always something I like to do, to find the best local barbecue. And I'd come back to LA and I'd get mad. I'd be like, why is there no good barbecue here, man? It all sucks, right? And so finally I got mad one day. I told my wife, like, I'm teaching myself. And I went to Home Depot and bought a crappy $100 smoker. And it was I was terrible. I couldn't even figure out how to get that thing lit, And I have these pictures now that pop up on my time hop from 7 years ago, where I was like really, really proud of this brisket, and they pop up now and I go, oh my God, that's so terrible looking. Like, I thought I did a good job, and I totally did. But it just became a passion that slowly, accidentally turned into, a little bit of a persona in my entertainment career. And now it's so fun to like my son had a soccer banquet yesterday, and I brought 6 racks of ribs. So there was all this like potluck dinner, and then I'm at the end of the table chopping ribs, and all of his friends know. So all of his friends are like, meet Dave is here. And so it's fun, man. It's fun to have that moniker and that kind of reputation.
I want to backtrack for just a second, and then we'll go back to another question. A fun story that I feel like, or a little anecdote maybe. My dad went to Auburn High School with Glenn from
nice.
Byron's.
Yeah.
And what's funny is, apparently, I don't think Glenn listens to podcasts, so I doubt he's even going to get this information, but my dad said that back in high school, Glenn was he was a little more overweight than he is now, and his nickname was Protein. And I think that's so funny that that his family like owns Byron's, and that's like his identity is that. Then that might be an offensive nickname to him, because I was a chubby teenager, and I'm sure that if someone called me one of my nicknames from back in the day, I'd be like, fuck you. But it's just a funny anecdote to me.
No, that's a great nickname, dude. My nickname is Meat Dave. So Protein's the same thing. Protein Dave might have been a better nickname.
But anyway, it just seems like, from a lot of the stories that I've heard you tell on podcasts about going to Auburn or in your comedy, that, eating good food, like Byron's or Willie's Wings or stuff like that, that was like an important part of, because honestly, that's what a lot of the South's identity is, even in the smallest places where there's nothing going on. Not that Auburn's that, but they have good barbecue or some kind of good food. So it's like the whole identity of the place is based around food. But I don't know. I'm kind of rambling a little bit. I have a question for you. When you were at Auburn, did you ever go to a restaurant, a pizza buffet on Gay Street called Mr. Gaddy's Pizza?
Yeah, I lived at the Commons my freshman year, and it was right next door to it. So we'd walk over there, and we would annihilate it because it was all you could eat.
Yeah, dude.
We would go over there and just absolutely. We would make an outing of it. We'd get like 7 dudes, and we'd go over there and just see who could crush it the most.
Well, that's really funny. Just in general. It's a small world. My grandfather was the general manager there for like the entire time that you were in school at Auburn, and okay. I had so many like birthday parties in like the little kids' birthday party room there, and we'd play in the arcade all the time. And my older brother and my cousin would go and just like, because we got in for free because my grandfather was the general manager. We would go all the time, and they would just, like you said, eat so much pizza. And it's just a funny, that's just like, I actually have a Mr. Gaddy's chair in my studio over here that my grandfather like repainted. They used to be orange and blue, and he repainted the orange part white. So it's like, you can still see some orange like scratching off under the white. But anyway, I just thought it was funny.
Yeah, no, Mr. Gaddy's was definitely, I was actually just recently talking about Mr. Gaddy's with somebody. I don't remember why, but food is totally anchor for memories for us, So I think especially college food, man, it's the first time you're away from home and your mom's not cooking meals for you, and you live in a dorm, so you can't really even cook. So like the places that you go and make you feel comfortable and you attach so many memories of that specific frame of time to food places. And I mean, especially in college towns. I mean, Willie's Wings was such a thing for us. Like, we ordered so many wings from Willie's. We were out camping one time at Watley's farm, way out in the middle of nowhere. Charlie Watley used to let us use his property to go out and camp. And we were starving one night. We're like, do you think we get Willie's to deliver all the way out here? And we called and we like negotiated it with the guy. We're like, how close can you come? So he drove it all the way out to that Busy Bee place. And we just drove down the street and met him at the Busy Bee, and then just it was most economic to order them 100 at a time. So we'd always order 100 wings, you know. And it was like $30. It was like nothing, you know.
Yeah.
And we loved Willie's, man. And then, you know, Mama Goldberg's is a staple. That's probably the most famous place in Auburn. I remember one time when I was a sophomore, I lived with the same dude I lived with my freshman year, but we got an apartment at Scarborough Square. And we had a third roommate who was a freshman, who was a dude who was a family friend of my roommate. So I didn't know this guy before he moved in with us. And he was rushing a frat. I think it was Beta. And they'd always call in the middle of the night, and I'd pick up the phone. We had landlines back then, right?
Yeah.
So I'd pick up the phone. I'd be like, hello? And they're like, it would be some drunk frat guy. He'd be like, Coleman. And I'd be like, nah, man, I don't think he's here. Coleman, get on the phone, Coleman. And I'm like, hold on. And I'd go bang on his door, and I'd be, get up, man. People are calling or whatever. And so I'd be like, why do these people call you in the middle of the night? And they're like, well, you know, we have to do whatever they say. Like, you know, so a lot of times they're too drunk to get food, so they send us somewhere to get food for them. And I go, well, do you have to do it? Like, yeah, we have to do it. I go, do they make you do weird stuff? He tells us all the stories. And I'm like, all right. So one day he left his directory out on the table. So it was all the guys who were like rushes with him. So we would just we'd pick a name and we'd call him. And we'd be like, Wilson. And they were like, yeah. And we're like, go get 3 pizzas from wherever, right? We're like, take it to the pool at Scarborough Square, leave it on the table, and don't ask any questions. Like, why do you want me just to bring it to you? Just don't ask any questions. And then we'd sit and we'd look out the blinds till a guy would come up and put a bunch of Milo's cheeseburgers or whatever we told him to get us down on the table, and then he'd drive away, and then we'd run out and grab it.
It really sucks that there's not a Milo's in Auburn anymore. I don't know why that was ever taken away, because like everybody, I have so many friends from the Birmingham area who love Milo's because it's all over the place up there. And so it really, you know, was, there's a lot of things that for some reason I found out like used to be in Auburn that were really cool and are not here anymore. And then other things that are here that I'm like, who even goes there? But yeah. Anyway, is it, I mean, I'm sure it's super strange for you considering you went to Auburn over 20 years ago. When you're back here, you're like, there's literally like, there were never even buildings this tall in downtown.
Yeah, it's so different, dude. Like when I was there, we got a Outback Steakhouse in Opelika, and that was like the biggest deal. We were like, okay, so now when our parents come into town, we at least have somewhere we could take them for dinner and make them buy us steaks or whatever. It was all the way in Opelika. And then they opened up a Gap on College Street.
Yeah.
And that was a huge deal, you know, that they were putting a Gap in there. And it's crazy how much stuff is there now. Now, like, you drive down the streets and, like, I'm like, I kind of, like, I remember this 7-Eleven being here, but I don't remember the skyscraper next to it, you know? Like, so it's like a lot of the old stuff mixed in with the new. I mean, now there's a Waffle House where you could walk to it right there on campus. It's like,
yep.
Dude, we had to find someone sober enough to drive us all the way down to 85 past Supper Club, down to the Waffle House down there. And you know what I did is I would always keep a bag of shredded hash browns in my freezer, and I had this Waffle House hat. And so whenever we'd get drunk, everyone would end up at my apartment in Scarborough Square, and I always had my shirt off too. And I'd put my Waffle House hat on, and I'd be like, whatever we had in the fridge, I'd be dicing up onions and tomato and scattered chunks and whatever, and I'd make Waffle House hash browns, and just, cause that's all anybody wanted anyways. No one cared about any of the other stuff, you know. And and we would just pig out. And then the next day I'd wake up and wonder why I have burns all over my stomach. I was cooking with grease the night before.
Yeah, I actually went to a birthday party a few years ago where one of the people who was friends with the guy whose birthday it was worked at Waffle House, and he brought over several cartons of the official Waffle House like hash browns. And so he set up a bar in the kitchen where he even had like a little tip plate because he paid for all the ingredients and was like, this is my gift, but it was obviously pretty expensive because he had like everything you can imagine to put on the hash browns. But it was a pretty awesome birthday party because I was like, yeah, let me get a double hash brown, extra crispy with, jalapenos and cheese. It was just so nice to do that kind of thing with an official Waffle House employee who was off the clock. But
yeah, that's dope.
He might have stolen the hash browns, but I don't know.
I mean, I used to watch those dudes back there in the griddle, working the griddle, and I secretly wanted to work the griddle, man. Like I was like, dude, I want to be back there to bacon and then, cause I was always, I don't know why, I've always been enamored with breakfast food. Like I'd go on business trips with my dad when I was a kid. And I think my dad wanted me to be impressed by all the business guys. And I was impressed by the the omelet station guy in the breakfast. And I'm like, you can just tell him what ingredients you want. He can custom make it to everyone. And there's, a line. He's always the most popular guy there. And I'm like, I always like the power that the omelet chef wielded.
I remember commenting on an episode of the Mermen at one point because you mentioned this, that you've never actually worked in like a restaurant, which is hilarious because you're like known as you're known by a lot of people as like Meet Dave or like, oh yeah, he's the comedian that's really good at barbecuing. And I think that's an awesome identity to have, but it's just funny that you've never actually professionally worked as any kind of.
I'm far from it, man. Like I try to be very careful to tell people like I am not an expert. I have no formal training in this whatsoever. I just really passionately poured myself into learning about it a couple of years back, and somehow had a little bit of a talent for coming out with a good product. And I'm a people person, man. Like that's anything I ever do, it's about relationships. It's about being humble and coachable, which I learned from sports, and I was lucky enough, and the podcast helped, to make friends with a lot of people in the barbecue community because I wanted to learn from them and I admired them. And they've been very gracious and cool about sharing secrets and knowledge. And I think that really helped my learning curve too, man, is that people have been very, very cool about not keeping the knowledge of themselves. They're willing to share it. But yeah, it's crazy. You know what? The only time I ever formally worked in food space, when I was a kid, my mom had this old school hot dog machine, like the ones where the hot dogs just roll on a
Yeah.
And so every time my grandma would have garage sales all the time. My grandma would buy stuff from garage sales, and then she'd have her own garage sales and flip everything. And so I'd sit out there and I'd sell hot dogs for $2 and sodas for $1. And I'd make $50 and go buy a new toy with it, And then when we were doing the fundraisers at Auburn, Auburn gave us the option of we could run our own concession stand at the football games.
Oh, so nice.
We tried it once, and I was running the register. And man, when you get put in that high pressure situation of people ordering food, they're in a rush, they're drunk or impatient, right? And you got to do the math on the fly. And it's like $3.25 plus $4.75 plus $3, but there were like 6 things, and it was so hard. I had such a respect for the food service after that, because that's a concession stand. That's like the most entry level food operation you could have, and I was overwhelmed. I was like, I never want to do this. I don't want to be a waiter,
Yeah, I mean, that is, like you said, one of the most high pressure ones, because you're selling, 100 hot dogs in 30 minutes, basically, as opposed to most restaurants don't do that kind of volume. So
yeah,
I've heard you maybe talk about this a little bit, that you have a family history as well, that your dad and your uncle went to Auburn. Is that correct?
Yeah, my dad and my uncle both grew up in Lake Wales, Florida. It's like Central Florida. And they ended up at Auburn. My dad was in the marching band. And
nice.
They both studied business, and then my family's in the car business. So I thought I was going to get a business degree and go into the car business. And that was going to be my life. And actually at Auburn, one of the, you have to take your core classes. And one of the core classes I took was great books. And my great books professor, Dr. McKelly, asked me to stay after class one day. And I thought I was in trouble. And he just said, Dave, I want you to know that like your paper, your essay that you wrote, it's really good, man. It's really good. And I'm like, oh, thanks, man. He's like, you're a really good writer. He's like, you might want to consider changing your major to English. And this is one of my biggest regrets in life, is my response just out of ignorance, because I knew I was going into this business world, right, was, well, I want to make money.
I mean, you weren't wrong, honestly. No. I got a liberal arts degree, I got a theater degree, and I have not made any money with it. So
yeah, but here I am saying it to a person who, one, just complimented me, two, has devoted his life to exactly what I'm shooting down, but I was very touched that he took the time to invest in something I had done, right? Even though I probably just pulled an all-nighter last minute and wrote that paper. And so it affected me enough that I ended up minoring in creative writing. I had a really cool poetry teacher named Natasha Trethaway, who's gone on to win literary awards and written books on poems and poetry books, whatever. So, I mean, it was really influential to me that guy sent me down that path. And I just wanted to it gave me confidence too to lean into it, because I started writing for a student newspaper there on campus, and I started to have kind of a voice where I could tell it was more comedic. Like, I was mostly writing about sports and about campus stuff, but it was all, I always try to make jokes, I saw that the club sports got no love, playing water polo. I just knew that they didn't get any love from any the publications. They probably do now. I'm sure now they put lacrosse and stuff and updates. But back then, dude, no one cared. And so I was like, I want to write about all the club sports. And I go, the first one I'm going to do is I'm going to explain what the clubs are like, how people get involved. And I go back and read it sometimes. I still have it in my archives. And I make myself laugh. I make little jokes about, each team, and it was funny. So it really, it's those days at Auburn set me on the path of what I'm doing today.
That's awesome. I mean, it's cool to hear that you were still, back then, even though you kind of knew for like, oh, I'm probably going to work for my family business, that you were still trying, interested in creative writing, interested in trying to do, but let me ask you, when do you think your interest in comedy started? And along with that, will you tell me some of your comedy inspirations, as in like, who did you watch as like a stand-up or just like as a comedic actor as a kid that you loved?
Well, I was a huge Saturday Night Live fan growing up. And I think a big part of it was, as a kid, watching my parents watch the TV and crack up, you're like, oh man, I would love to make somebody feel like that, like my parents, those are your heroes. And to see them, I go out to a hunting camp with my dad, and here's all these rough and tough, grown men who are out there camping and, drinking beer and hanging out with each other. And they had Andrew Dice Clay on a boombox, and it was on repeat the whole weekend. and to see these dudes just cracking up on something they've already listened to 4 times, I was like, man, what power, And I remember Gallagher was a big ticket, and my parents went to go watch Gallagher, and they were like trying to explain it to me, like, oh, he's gonna squash a watermelon, and we got front row seats, and I'm like, I don't get it, And I used to love the Hey Vern commercials. This is before the Ernest movies. He was a character on, I don't remember what they were selling, but it was like, Hey Vern, Hey Vern, did you hear about, and I used to impersonate it and make my parents' friends laugh at dinner parties. And Saturday Night Live was a big one though, man. I love Dana Carvey. He was like my era. And I just thought he was so funny. And I've gotten to open for him since, and run into him once or twice, and he remembered my name, and that was just like the coolest thing ever. I I chased my girlfriend from Auburn, who's now my wife, up to Charlotte, North Carolina. And she took me to this place because she knew I was a Saturday Night Live fan. She goes, there's this place that supposedly does like live version of sketch comedy. So we went to check it out and I was blown away. I was like, I want to do that. So I approached him after and I said, hey man, I freelance write for this paper because I found a paper up there I was freelance writing high school sports for. And I go, I want to write sketches. And they were like, well, we just write our own sketches. So you got to just try out for the group. And I'm like, well, I never performed before. And I'm like, but I'll do it. So I tried out and I got in and then I started, I couldn't write enough. I was so excited. I wrote sketch every week, try to get one in the show every week. And then, you know, you just get so much stage time that you kind of learn on the fly. And then those guys kind of introduced me to some more modern stand-ups. So like I started really getting into Brian Regan and Doug Stanhope. And David Cross was big at the time,
Mm-hmm.
and you know there was a lot of guys like that I got introduced to through them. And when I moved back to Miami to go into business with my dad, there was nothing like that down there. So I was like, I tried stand up once or twice up in Charlotte. So I'm like, well, I guess let me just try stand up. So I'd go to the open mic every Wednesday. I took Wednesday as my day off, and I'd go do the open mic that night. And that's what set me down that road.
Nice. That's so it sounds like it was mostly like really started for you after college. But I mean, honestly, there's very few people who even get started before they're like, you know, 22 to 25. Like that seems like the prime time for most people to start doing stand up.
Man, whenever I meet like a college kid who's already in, it's probably a lot more common now because you have podcasts and YouTube and people know what the stand-up world's like. I mean, dude, my only exposure to seeing comedy back then was when people would come to campus. So like Dave Chappelle came one time.
Oh, that's awesome.
Jeff Dunham.
It's a big ticket.
Yeah, he had just done Half Baked, so it was like everyone was excited to see him. We had no idea he was going to turn into who he is now, you know?
Yeah.
Jeff Dunham used to come a lot, and he wasn't
fun.
even famous yet. He was just working the college circuit, you know? And I'd always try to go watch whatever comics came because I just loved watching it.
Yeah.
But now I think people, like, you know, they get exposed to it. So I think a college kid who's really into it would know, oh, I could go find an open mic at a comedy club and start going down this path earlier. I bet I would have if I had known if there was a comedy club somewhere close by or a way to like take a class or something. I would have done it in a heartbeat.
Did you know that Auburn technically has a comedy club now?
Yeah, the crown of comedy, right?
Yes. I've heard mixed reviews. So I haven't been yet. Maybe I will at some point, but it's cool to see that someone's trying to start doing something. I just, haven't been yet, so I have no real opinion. I've only heard what I've heard, so.
Well, I've heard it's mostly urban acts.
Yeah.
But they do mix in a lot of other stuff. I think they do like midget wrestling or something.
Yeah, they do that. But I was gonna say they also have lately been expanding to host like music nights for Auburn students. So it's not just comedy. I think. Honestly, Auburn is a really weird market to try to open something that's just a comedy club. I feel like you kind of have to make it a venue, that can host several things because there's just not enough. But to their credit, I mean, according to what I saw on their Instagram, they've had people as big as DC Youngfly. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he's a real big comedian and actor out of Atlanta. I know for a fact that Bert knows who he is because he talks about him all the time on like podcasts because he's on a show called 85 South. But
85 South is huge.
Yeah, but I mean, but I remember back when I was living in Atlanta, DC Youngfly would I would take acting classes at this studio, and he would come in there to record self-tape auditions and stuff. He's pretty big, especially within the Black community. So for him to come to Auburn was last year, the year before was a pretty big deal. And apparently Kenan Thompson from SNL has like a company that hosts like smaller events, and he's like, his company has like hosted events there, which I'm like, it's interesting, but it's just, I haven't been, so just thought I'd bring it up.
Yeah. I always am a little weary of the events where they like have a big celebrity like that on the flyer, and it's like his people are going to be watching the show, you know? Like,
yeah. I mean, that's the thing. At first, I was like, "Is this real? You know, is he even?" But his actual official Instagram was promoting the group that was doing it, so I was like, I guess it is real. But it is kind of, people respond, and this is what I hate about kind of like events, especially in comedy and all that. People respond so much to like names. Some of the funniest comedians I've ever seen are people who open for someone else, and I hadn't really heard of them before, or someone that I'm kind of like, okay, well, yeah, you know, I'll take a chance and go to this show, and then I'm like, they're actually way funnier than the people I wanted to see originally, you know? So comedy is one of those things that I love because you can always be surprised by someone that you just don't expect to be the most hilarious person in the room.
Oh yeah, man. I mean, you know, the best example I can give you is just the fact that I've opened for Bert so much that, a lot of times when you open for someone that famous and like with that passionate of fans, they don't care about you. They're like, oh man, we're not here to see you. Bring on the dude that we're so excited to see. But Bert's fans are not like that at all. Bert's fans are so excited to be like, oh, who did Bert bring? You know? Mm-hmm. And they're just true comedy fans. So it's been a blessing and a wild ride getting to do so many shows with him the past few tours. And his fans have just been really cool to me.
So, I've never seen one of Bert's shows. I've never been to one of those. So I've never seen you in that. I've only seen you perform as like the headliner for the evening, you know, doing
in a coffee shop.
which I will apologize on behalf of Coffee Cat. We're actually hosting a comedy show tomorrow night, and I'm bringing my lights to make it a much more professional event. So I apologize about that. We only host comedy shows like every 2 to 4 months. Usually we want to do it like once a month, but it's just like, anyway, for anybody that wasn't at the show, we just didn't have a great lighting setup, and Dave was able to like comedically, you know, get a better lighting setup on the fly, and make jokes about it. I think you did a good job of like not letting it suck all the energy out of the room, but yeah, I apologize that things were not very professional in that way.
Nah, man, it was fine, dude. I mean, it was fine for me. I just felt bad if people couldn't see my face. And plus, you were there videoing that. And I was like, man, Peter's not going to be able to get anything if we don't shine some light on my face, you know?
Yeah.
So I've produced enough shows at this time that I know, like, you know, you got to have at least one decent light and the audio's got to be good. And that's all you need for a good comedy show, you know?
Well, I guarantee we are doing things to make every show from here on out better. Like, the lighting is going to be clutch this time, let me just say. But, I wanted to bring up basically just the fact that I've only seen you, or you know, I've listened to your comedy albums, so like I've only really heard you do longer sets, and so I've never seen you like open for someone or anything like that. But from everything I've heard in your work, I think that, you know, you're a really good like addition to Bert's style of comedy. But I find myself, as I'm kind of becoming, you know, as my son gets a little bit older and as I'm like really into fatherhood, I'm leaning more towards stuff that's more in your style of comedy, which I would say is like, I don't know how to exactly describe it. It's like more dad humor, if that makes sense to me. And that makes sense to you. And I hope that's not insulting, as people use dad joke as like a bad thing, but I think it's such a compliment, you know, in some ways, because my dad and my grandfather were some of the funniest people I ever knew.
Yeah. Now, when I did my first album, one of the reviews, when I first started reading it, I thought it was going to be a slight, and I actually ended up being really, it was a huge compliment. But he said like, it was something like, Dave's humor is a lot of the same stories you have. He just is much better at telling the story than you are, you know? It's kind of like that. Whereas like stuff you're going to relate to in your everyday life, you know? But, you know, Dave just has a way of making it very, very funny. And I'm like, all right, it's a compliment.
Well, like, I think a good example is your bit that you do on drive-by birthday parties during the pandemic. Yeah. Like, that one, and the thing is, you know, I know you, I feel like well enough at this point that I can pick out the things that are you know, what every comedian does, which is like you're peppering in a little bit of bullshit, you know, to spice up the story. So I don't think, you know, to the audience, I don't think Dave drinks and drives as much as he jokes that he does. But but I mean, I think my point is, it's just cool to see kind of like this mixture of family friendly and also like, you know, stuff that goes over kids' heads and that like parents can chuckle about that like the kids don't understand, you know, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I realized that recently. I'm like, man, I have like 3 bits that I tongue in cheek say that I'm drinking while I'm not driving while drunk, but just drinking while driving.
Yeah,
and I'm like, maybe I should pull back on that a little bit.
The cops are gonna be like, I listened to your albums, I heard those podcasts.
Yeah, but where was I gonna go with that? What was the last thing that you said? You said
I think I'm just saying it's cool to see a mixture of like what I would consider, like, you seem like the kind of comic that if you were performing and there's a bunch of, in like a space where there's a bunch of kids or teenagers, you'd probably dial back some of the, you know, some of the, so, I would say the only dirty thing about your comedy really is the cursing, but it's not too much ever.
Yeah, so what you know, in my everyday life, don't get me wrong, dude, I laugh at a good sex story as much as the next guy, and I certainly have had some that I've told on stage, but for whatever reason, my brain just doesn't go there when I'm writing, you know. But I learned this trick when I was working a cruise ship, because you had to do a theater show once during the week where kids were in the audience, right? But you know, if you tailor your material to make it too kid friendly, then it's not funny anymore. Like saying fuck in the right place during a joke, it gives it emphasis. Now, if you say fuck 72 times, it's going to be more like brash, you know, it's going to be grating. But when you pick your spot where you drop the fuck, it makes it funny, right? So you lose that when you just take all the cursing out of a story, and we're adults for the most part. So I had this thing where when I did this show with the kids there, I say, listen, I'm not going to change any of my material. I go, the kids aren't listening to the context anyways. They're just here. I go, but what I'm going to do is anywhere I would normally say a cuss word, I'm going to say the word poop so that it has the same rhythm. But you know, but it's kid friendly. And the kids hear me say that and they just start laughing like, he said poop. And so now the kids are listening to the show because every time I'd say like, and then I was like, holy poop, like that, you know, and the place die laughing, you know? Yeah. I'm like, all right, I figured out a way to not really change the emphasis of the words and the rhythm of the words, but to technically make it kid friendly. And it was a way to get the kids involved in the show and they were laughing at lines, you know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that it's just some of the most skillful comedians really are people that can play to any audience, whether, you know, they're young or old, you know, no matter what race or ethnicity or background they come from, or you know, or gender. It's just, you should be able to make everybody laugh in some way. Yeah. And obviously there's people who are dirty that are hilarious, but where was I going with that?
I don't know. It's not intentional, by the way. Like I do not care if I'm a clean comic or a dirty comic or talk about stuff that relates to whoever. It's just literally, it's what comes out of me, you know? So it's not intentional, man. If something happens tomorrow, like I had a story about my kids when they were younger, walked in on my wife and I having sex one time. So I mean, if something funny happens, like I'm like gonna put it in the act, you know? Yeah. It's just that for whatever reason, most of my writing just happens to gravitate towards stuff that's on the cleaner side.
Well, I think that kind of makes me transition into like, I'm going to pay you what I think is a compliment, and I hope you take it that way. I think that, okay, so I only literally know a couple people who I would put in this category, and I'm going to put you in this category. I think that you are a cool Christian. And here's why I say that. So like, what's really cool to me was seeing you perform live and seeing you do like a full set, or, you know, you do this on your comedy albums too. You will tell stories about going to church or about like, you know, just something involving the fact that you are Christian, but then you don't but you also pepper in curse words, you pepper in like funny, off-color jokes, and you in general just don't seem like a judgmental person at all. And the reason I'm saying all this, I know you live in a place now that is very different from where I live in terms of like, here, it's literally every day that I'm walking like on campus or something at Auburn, and there's some religious nut who's just like, you're all going to hell. Even when I was a little kid, I remember going to an Auburn football game, and a guy with a sign with all these Bible verses on it that was like, 15 feet tall was literally saying to me as like a 5-year-old, like, you're going to hell for going to this Auburn game because you're worshiping false idols. So I think here's my point. I'm not Christian anymore. I was when I was younger. And I think a lot of it was growing up in the South and having people kind of really shove their beliefs down your throats. I love meeting people like you who are able to be Christian and then not be judgmental, not, you're representing Christians well is my compliment. So I hope you take that way.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I feel
you
like
know how to have a good time,
Yeah, I love drinking beers and making mistakes, man. I'm not a Christian comic. Like, my comedy doesn't revolve around, the label of being a Christian, because when you say you're a Christian comic, then most of the comedy is specific towards that audience, right? I'm just a comic who happens to be Christian, and when I pepper stuff in, like you said, it's just because that's an actual detail from my life that's true, like if something happened and I'm bringing it up that, that the way we know that kid is from church, unless it helps the joke to change it to something different, then I might as well just keep the true detail in there. And details are what make stories good. It's when you're like, oh, okay, that really happened, because it's not just saying a kid or someone real general, So yeah, I mean, it's, once again, I don't think it's intentional. It's just me being open and honest in whatever that particular bit is. I totally remember those concourse preachers on campus. There was this one guy, I remember I was sitting and listening to him, just like, what the fuck is this guy doing? And he goes, I remember his line, he goes, I used to be like you. I was a sinner. I attended this university. I would go to parties and I would sit in the corner of the room and I would wait for a girl to light up a cigarette, because I figured if she'd put that in her mouth, maybe she'd put something else in her mouth. And I look at my buddy and I'm like, I think I'm learning from this guy. I think he doesn't realize he's teaching us the wrong stuff. But it's like, look, man, you can believe in God and go to church and call yourself a Christian. Doesn't mean that you're perfect. It doesn't mean that you're, if anything, it's more of a reason to be a Christian and to try to learn from other people and to just have a belief in something bigger than you. If we were perfect, then we wouldn't need that to lean on. You know what I mean? So I'm not look. I love drinking beers and wrestling my 40-year-old friends on tour buses and, talking like an adult. I mean, I can't, it's who I am. I was raised hearing words, adult words. Like, I can't just now be like, bad words don't exist, Yeah. Just, if that's the worst thing we do in our life, then we're doing okay.
Yeah. I've had some run-ins with the people on campus before, because they get, I like to walk on campus and, take my son on walks and everything in the stroller, just walk him around. And they really can ruin the peaceful, calm nature of a campus like Auburn, where if they aren't out there, and it's not a game day, it's really just like a great place to just chill, like there's really not a lot going on. But, it's real funny, real quick. Yesterday I was walking, and right catty corner to where Tumors Drugs is in downtown, the little things that you push on like street poles to like cross the street, like the button and everything. Right next to where you have to push the buttons, this guy set up these 3 little like easels with like information. It was like a little, like a poster board kind of thing, and it said something about like why the moon landing was fake, and And this guy was so into it that like I was crossing the street at one point, I was just waiting there, and anybody who was just like waiting there, he would just go, "It's fake. It's fake. It's fake, ladies. It's fake." And I was just like, I just want to get away from this guy. And I guess part of that is just because Auburn is a place that it's a university in an area that there's not a lot else going on really. So like people just think, well, that's where if I want to get my weirdo message out, I'll just go, spew it on campus. I don't know.
Well, it's the deep South, man. Like there's gonna be some strong religious opinions in the area, just comes with the territory.
You've lived in a lot of different places in terms of like very culturally different. Like you grew up in Miami, which this is only me just kind of messing with you because I'm going to join Forrest and everybody from the Mermen with messing with you, that it's hilarious to me that your Spanish is not like perfect if you grew up in Miami. But
well, ironically, when I was in high school Spanish in Miami, I was like, gracias, una mi, and people were like, dude, you're a gringo, bro. You're Spanish too. And then I went up to Auburn and I had to take Spanish too, for at least one Spanish credit. And I was like, gracias. And everyone's like, he's a whiz kid. He already speaks the language. I was like the best Spanish speaker in my class at Auburn.
That's funny. Yeah, I mean, I went to Opelika High, and one of our Spanish teachers was a coach, like a football coach, who had about like that kind of accent, like a Southern accent, while he was teaching Spanish. But where was I going with that? I was making fun of you for not being able to speak Spanish for some reason. I'm trying to think.
Yeah, the like Forrest does at the Mermen.
Which, okay, hey, I was, a quick, weird segue, but compliment. I've really been enjoying the Mermen. I think that you and Forrest are a good, you guys are a good juxtaposition of like personalities, because I honestly wasn't super familiar with him, before that. And I like just like his curmudgeonly attitude towards everything. Yeah. And then you're just trying to have fun the whole time. And he's just like, it's basically like I guess he's the straight guy and you're the wacky one, kind of. But I really enjoy it because I feel like I see you in your proper element as like who you really are.
Yeah, it's funny, man, because Forrest and I met. We both did the first open mic I did at the Miami Improv was also, I'd done comedy, but it was my first real like dive into, all right, I live in Miami now, I'm going to start getting into the comedy theater. It was his first open mic ever. So he and I were kind of like, in that same like class of South Florida comedians coming up, and as different as we are, we just hit it off, and we've always stayed friends, and our careers have actually taken pretty similar paths over the years. And I don't get to talk to him as much as I like, but every time I do catch up with him and talk to him, he always makes me laugh because he's like, did you see this? This is so stupid. And then I just try to get him like razzled up. I just try to I just always try to like needle him with my like. And so I was like, dude, we should do a podcast together. And I go, even if nobody ever listens to it, I'm like, it'll be a way that we can keep in better touch and just make sure. And luckily people have liked it and people are listening to it and we're growing our listenership. But at the same time, I just like getting to talk to Forrest every week, and he just makes me so happy when I say something and he knows that I'm fucking around, but he can't let it go. He's gonna be like, say out loud that you're kidding. Say out loud that you're kidding. And I'm like, well, I mean, maybe I'm not. He's like, you better, It just like things bother him and he can't let it go. And that's my favorite thing in the world.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, I like that y'all are also, like, you make it informational as well. Like, there's a lot of stuff that I probably normally would not research or know that much about. I mean, I've learned a bunch about, things like manatees from Forrest, just kind of talking about his past jobs.
Well, now you could take anything Forrest says about manatees, you could take as factual, but anything else you learn on the podcast, you might want to double check this. Don't count on us to having accurate research done.
Yeah. No, I think my favorite bit so far, and this is something that just kind of happened to y'all, is Richard from Australia. Like, I mean, like every time that he's on, he's like, "Hi guys, it's Richard from Australia." I'm just
Yeah.
like, all right, it's gonna be golden.
Yeah, he's a character. He's in the Mermen world now. Him and Tyler from Georgia.
Yeah.
The two of them, man. They message me like every day, and I'm like, guys.
You're like, I'm really happy that you're supporting.
I love you, but yeah. So the guy Tyler, who called, for people who don't know, don't listen by us, we have a hotline you could call in and leave messages. And these two guys were the first two guys who they would get drunk and call like every week. And so now they're just regulars. They call all the time. And we know a little bit about them now. One of them lives in Australia.
Yeah, it kind of makes you like, oh, should we, have, it's one of those things where it's like you let them on once and now they're like, we're gonna be on every episode.
We're just glad someone likes us that much that they would call.
Yeah, and I was enjoying keeping up with the saga of will Richard get his meat rub, his barbecue rub.
Yeah, he got it. I sell my own all-purpose seasoning that you could put on barbecue, but you could also, if you're not in barbecue, you just put it on anything, eggs or macaroni and cheese or chicken or steak or whatever. And so he bought some off my website, but shipping to Australia is really, rough. So I finally shipped it out to him, and he received it this past week.
Nice. That's awesome. We're definitely getting closer towards the end of our of the podcast and everything, but I just kind of wanted to. This is something I wanted to bring up, and just kind of get your opinion on. Or not opinion, but like see what you think of this. So, like I mentioned before, my grandfather was he's one of the funniest people I ever knew, and those people I think there's a lot in the South who they're not trying, it's like they're trying to be funny, but they're not trying to be a comedian, but at the same time, they say the funniest shit you've ever heard, and you're like, someone else telling the story is almost like the only way you can even tell it. But basically, my grandfather was the biggest Auburn fan I've ever met. He would go to every single game, no matter how bad we were doing, and he would sometimes talk about how much he hated Alabama. And that's a pretty hot topic for people in Alabama, in case anyone's watching who doesn't know. It's Auburn fans hate Alabama fans hate Auburn fans. We both have things to say about each other. And no matter what, there will always be that rivalry. Well, my grandfather would be facetious sometimes, and he'd be like, I don't care if Alabama, is playing my worst enemy. When, in a game, I'm gonna cheer for my worst enemy. And something he said in the mid-2000s that was very relevant at the time is he goes, I don't care if Alabama is playing Al-Qaeda. I'm pulling for Al-Qaeda. And I remember just being like, that in a nutshell is Auburn fans. He was an old conservative dude that, was at the time was very much so like, nah, we got to defeat Al-Qaeda. But he was just like, that's how much I hate Alabama.
Yeah. Some people would say Alabama is Al-Qaeda.
But then he would come up with some crazy stuff that he was also, since he was a pretty conservative guy, he didn't like to curse. So he would say things at games that cracked me up because they didn't have any cuss words in them. Like one time.
He'd be like, holy smokes, we got to get this guy.
Well, no, but one time he yells out, there was a pass that Auburn tried to make, and the ref ruled it, or it was ruled incomplete. Even though the Auburn fans thought we got it, and my grandfather yells out, "If that was an incomplete pass, then you're a complete nut." And I was like,
Grandpa, tone it down.
Yeah, right. Everyone in the faculty section was like, "Whoa, hold on now."
Hey, there's kids here.
But anyway, he was one of those people that one of the biggest Auburn fans, and ironically, one of the only people in my family that didn't actually go to Auburn. So that's kind of funny. But anyway, just thought I would tell those little anecdotes to another Auburn person who enjoys a good joke about Alabama and all that.
Yeah, well, man, sports, that's what's awesome about sports, is it's how we connect with different generations. My grandpa wasn't the hugest sports fan in the world, but he liked watching the Dolphins games, and he'd call me and talk to me about, Davey, what do you think the Dolphins are going to do today, And I'd be like, I'm like, I don't know, Grandpa. I think they were probably not going to do. It was like one season, the Dolphins only won one game, and I talked to my grandpa more than ever because he'd call me every week and he'd be like, "Oh, they're going to do it this week." I'm like, "I don't know, Grandpa." So it's just, that team's long gone from our memory banks. But the fact that my grandpa called me every week, had an excuse to call me. That's what sports is about, man. It's that connection. I wish I still had this voicemail. One time my grandpa called me up and he was like, "Hey, Dave." My grandpa would sing and hum everything. And he was like, "Hey, Davey, it's your grandpa. Getting ready to watch the Dolphins game. Call me back." Right? And he set his phone down and he didn't hang it up. So I just had this like 3-minute voicemail of him like watching the game going, boom, 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 boom. Ah, that's terrible. Nancy, where's my scotch? Like, and I wish it was such a perfect soundbite of who my grandpa is. I wish I still had that recording.
Have you ever had do you have any cool stories? And it's fine if you don't. Being somewhere not anywhere close to Alabama and you're wearing something Auburn related, or you see someone in something Auburn related and just having a War Eagle moment, I guess?
Oh yeah, totally, man. I mean, not a specific one off the top of my head, but that's one of the coolest things. I always try to wear some sort of Auburn gear when I travel because you know how it is, man. You no matter where you're at, somebody's going to walk by and go, War Eagle, War Eagle, Yeah. And, I grew up a big University of Miami fan because, we just grew in the area and my uncle and my dad are boosters and whatever. So, I love the University of Miami just as much, but it's not the same. People don't come over to you and go like, "Go Canes." With Auburn, man, they'll walk by. They'll go out of their way to come over and be like, "War Eagle,"
Yeah.
I'm sure I'll think of a good one once we hang up, but
yeah. Well, I mean,
it's hard to beat Tim Cook.
Yeah. I mean, the closest thing I have is just a story from my dad where back in like 2003, I remember my family was on vacation in Seattle. We were in Seattle and we were at the top of the Space Needle. And my dad saw a guy wearing a hat from far away, or like a shirt, that was like an Auburn shirt. And he started walking over there. And then as he walked over there, he realized that it was one of his good friends that he went to high school at Auburn High with and Auburn University with. So it was like crazy that he was like, "I didn't even know you lived here." And I'm like, because that guy lived there apparently. So it was just weird that happens.
Well, I'll tell you this. I was at the most recent Super Bowl. And my buddy and I had VIP passes to go to this tailgate before. And so I was wearing this exact hat. And we just started talking to these drunk people next to us just randomly, right? We're just making chit chat. And the guy goes, "Is that an Auburn hat?" I go, "Yeah." And he's like, "War Eagle." I'm like, "Oh, War Eagle." And so he's like, I taught. He goes, "I taught at Auburn." And I go, "No way." And he's like, "Yeah, I taught business something or other, right?" And I'm like, "What years?" So we went through the whole thing. And I'm like, I don't remember him specifically, but he's like, "If that was your major and those are the years that were there," he's like, "You were in my class." And I'm
That's
like,
crazy.
"Are you serious?" Yeah, he's like, "Oh, for sure." He's like, "You would have definitely been in my class." And I'm like, "I believe you. I only remember like 2 classes that I took in business, but when I was at Auburn, so I was a human resource major, and for whatever reason, all of the major was mostly women. And so I was one of the few dudes. And once you get into the actual major classes, it was very group work oriented. So you'd have to usually do the group work all year long, and then you'd present at the end of the semester. And all these girls, for whatever reason, were like, they didn't want to present. They were like shy, right? But they were great note takers. They were very smart, right? And so I was like, "Hey, if you guys do all of the work, I'll give a hell of a presentation at the end of the semester." And they were always like, "Deal,"
Yeah.
So that was my thing, man. That was my foray into public speaking. Was at the end of the year, they would fill me in on everything I had to present. I'd go up there and have some sort of anecdote and some sort of little jokes written in there, and I'd go up and I'd give them and it looked like I was the one who did all the work, and I didn't do anything till the last week.
So my dad actually teaches in the business department at Auburn these days, full time, like year round. And it's really kind of funny seeing the perspective from a professor. He comes to me all the time and is like, "You won't believe this crazy thing that someone said on Rate My Professor or on like this, evaluation, or it's funny to get the perspective of like what the professors are dealing with, because it's some people that are just ridiculous with like how they want him to bend over backwards to help him. And it's just, I guess they're shooting their shot,
Yeah, dude. Well, I learned it's obviously a different world now. I mean, Rate My Professor. We definitely did not have that. But when you learn, like, going from high school to college is like your college classes are like, there's like 400 people in your class sometimes, right?
Yeah.
So you're just a name. Like, they don't know you. Like, there's no interpersonal relationship. So those office hours exist. Pop into your professor's office hours and introduce yourself. Make up a reason. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And then now he actually knows the human being behind that name. And if you need something in the future, you're more likely to get it as an actual person instead of just somebody who's another, serial number.
Have your kids showed any interest in going to Auburn?
Yeah, they're Auburn fans because of me and my wife. I think my older son will want to go play sports somewhere, and I don't know if Auburn would be the best landing spot for him for, the path he's going to have the opportunity to go anywhere he wants, I think, because he's got just incredible grades. So I wouldn't even be surprised if he ended up at like Ivy League or somewhere really.
That's awesome.
Really, like that. But my younger son, I could see really enjoying going to Auburn. He's really hands-on. He's got an engineer's brain. The Auburn's got a great engineering school. I think he would like the big school atmosphere. So yeah, maybe my second son. I don't care. They can go anywhere except for Florida or Alabama.
Yeah, that's
maybe Georgia too. I can't wear a Georgia shirt either.
It's funny because I used to be more annoyed with Georgia fans, and then I lived in Atlanta for 4 years, and I kind of actually got to like them. I think part of it is this. It's not even really it doesn't have anything to do with the school or the football team, but I have spent time in Athens, and compared to Auburn, it actually kind of blows my mind with how, like, I was more into creative stuff and art, and then the arts and all that I ended up going to Auburn or staying in Alabama, because Athens is such a cool town for, like, if you're into music or just kind of like, they have an alternative scene that Auburn doesn't have, like, and it's pretty flourishing.
Yeah. No, it's a cool town, man. We played a water polo tournament there one time. I think the statute of limitations is up. I can talk about this. But there was this Mexican restaurant that had this like 7-foot like Mexican caricature like outside their restaurant.
Yeah.
And we kept driving by going, dude, that thing is pretty cool. And in the middle of the night, we went over, and my buddy always had a tool set in his car, and we stole it. And so we wake up the next morning and we have this thing in our hotel room. We're like, what did we do? And we're like, well, we own it now. So we drove it back to Auburn, and that thing, I don't know where it is today, but that thing got passed around, and it was always in someone's house,
That's funny. That's funny. Just out of curiosity, because this is like an area that I hung out in Auburn a lot. Did you ever, because I know that these places existed when you were in school, did you ever go to parties at either Shady Glen or Ford Court? Did those ring a bell?
Shady Glen sounds familiar. I don't know what Ford Court is. We had the Cloisters, we had Scarborough Square, and I have a joke about living in apartment 855F, and I couldn't remember if I made that up to fit the joke or if that was, and so I drove by when I was just there, and sure enough, it was 855F was my apartment number. I go, oh, that was a real thing.
That's funny. I only bring it up because, like, when I was at Auburn, I lived at Shady Glen, and it was an apartment complex that a lot of musicians and, like, kind of creative people lived, where we would throw pretty big parties a couple times a year, where it was like, there's like 5 bands on the lineup, and we have like 2 or 3 different townhouse apartments that are set up to where it's like one band's playing over here and the next one plays right after him over here. So it was like, but I know that apartment complex has been there since like the 70s, and apparently that used to be kind of like a party spot. So I was just curious because, like, you know,
Shady Glen sounds familiar, but I don't remember Ford Court.
Yeah, Ford Court was right next to Shady Glen, but now there's a huge apartment complex there called the Standard on the corner of Glen and Gay Street. But so like, tell me, what was like a fun, you know, Saturday night in Auburn for you back when you were in school though? Like, and like, be specific with like names of places if you remember, just because it's fun for me to like walk down memory lane of like what things used to be like. Because honestly, it sounds like you went to Auburn during a pretty awesome time. I hear the 90s was it was more quaint.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't have all the decisions to make that you guys do. There was like, you know, 3 or 4 main bars where it's like, which one are we going to do tonight, you know? Well, first of all, I threw great parties because I was a very social person and I had everybody's phone number. So if I knew we were throwing a party, I was not going to half-ass it. I wanted people there. So I would take time, I'd sit down and I would call. I'd go down the line. I'd tell them, hey, party tonight. We're going to have great music. Yep, I got all my CDs out. Yep. Oh, I got a keg, scored a keg. And late night hash browns, you know, and I'd always have a ton of people show up to parties. But we would go to the main bars there, you know, it was called Neons back then. Now it's Sky Bar or whatever. And side note, after the comedy show last month, when I saw you, we went with the owner over to the Southern. Is that what it's called?
Southeastern.
The
new spot,
They had a DJ, and the place was packed. And I'm like, oh my God, this is the most popular bar in town. I didn't know that's where we were going. And so the owner took us up top, and we had a little section, and we were getting free drinks and having a blast. The other alumni, my friends were there, whatever. And when we were in our little thing, it was really fun. But when I had to walk through the crowd to go to the bathroom, I'm not exaggerating or making this up, multiple students looked over at me and went, what are you doing here? Like, you know,
out loud?
Like, how? Yeah, they were like, how old are you? And I was like, dude, I'm getting tired. Like, I get it. I'm not supposed to be here. Me and my buddies aren't supposed to be here, but we're here, you know? But they just kept going, how old are you? So then every time I had to go to the bathroom, I started pretending like I was a dad looking for their daughter. I was just going through it. I was going, Michelle, where are you? You know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's I guess it's difficult to like still want to have a good time because I'm 29. I already feel weird. I've been to like, you know, a house show that one of my friends, his band was playing at. And I was like, I feel so strange that there are people who are like even under 21 here. And I'm like, I just feel not that there's anything bad going on, but it's just like, it's just weird, you know, that you're like socializing and hanging out with people that you're just like, I was, you know, starting college when you were like 7 or so, you know, that kind of thing.
Well, so the best was we had a house, and now there's a parking garage there, but we had a house just off Gay Street, and there was apartment complexes around there, but there wasn't many houses that close. So it was literally the main stretch of bars on College Street. If it was here, we were like one street and then cut through a parking lot and you were at our house. Yeah. So a lot of people would park. We had a big yard, and we also had an empty bank parking lot attached to our. So at night, the bank parking lot was empty. So people would always park at our house to then walk out and go to the bars. Gotcha. We didn't lock our doors a single day the whole time we lived there. And we had 3 couches in our living room. We had 2 giant TVs. We had a ping pong table, a foosball table, darts. We always had a keg on ice, and we had 5 guys living there. There was 5 bedrooms, right? And it was an old house, but it was nice. It was just laid out great, right? And so we called it the Polo Hut, and we had a big mural on the wall. That's a Pizza Hut emblem, but it said Polo Hut. and it was a really fun house, man. And everyone knew that if they were too drunk to get home, or one of their buddies was, our door was unlocked and we had plenty of couches. So there was many mornings I would wake up and just have a stranger or someone I barely knew sleeping on the couch. And I'm just like, hey man, want me to make you some eggs? They're like, that'd be great, you know? And we had We had a lot of parties, you know, even if we went out to the bars, the after party would be back at the house. There's always people back. There's always people around, which I love, man. I hate being alone. I don't mind being alone. Like when I go travel, by the way, I don't like to be lonely. So I'm fine. Even if it's like I'm by myself, if I'm in an airport and there's people around me, I'm fine. So being in that atmosphere where there was never not somebody to hang out with, I was just in my element, you know?
Yeah.
And we would throw so many parties there. And there was the guy I referenced earlier, Charlie Watley, right? He owned he was an old school Auburn guy, a real Southern gentleman, owned half of the town, the real estate in town, and he would play water polo with us. He'd come, he liked to swim to keep in shape, and you know he was a like part of the family, dude, right?
Yeah.
So we'd be like we'd be like, Charlie, we're having a party on Saturday, come by. Well, Dave, what time's your party at? I'm like, I don't know. People start showing up probably around 8 or 9 o'clock, and we'll go till everyone's passed out. He's like, all right, I'll be there. I'm going to see you about 2. And I go, all right, Charlie. So Charlie would show up at 2 o'clock, and he'd have a ham. He'd put a ham in our oven, and he'd put it on a low temperature. He'd be like, I'll see you tonight for the party, guys. We're like, all right. Charlie would leave. He'd come back at 8 o'clock for the party, right? He'd pull his ham out and let it rest on the cabinet. He'd put biscuits in. So at about 10 o'clock, he'd pull the biscuits out. He'd assemble biscuits, ham, and cheese. Ooh. And he'd put them back in the oven so they melt up real good. So now at about 10:30, 11 o'clock, all the college kids are getting pretty drunk. He'd walk around with his apron and he'd be like, ham biscuit, ham biscuit, ham biscuit. And everyone just eat these ham biscuits. Like they knew if I was throwing a party, Charlie was going to have ham biscuits. And he probably saved some lives by putting food in people's bellies, you know? And so I had this dude who played water polo for Tennessee called me, maybe a year ago. Hadn't talked to this dude in probably a decade. And he goes, Dave, I got to ask you something. I go, what? He's like, when we used to party in college, was there a guy who used to make us ham biscuits, or was that just like, or did I just make that up in my head? I go, nah, that's a real guy. He still lives there. I still hang out with him every time I go back to Auburn.
That's funny.
Just so many cool people like that, man, that just made, I think, a lot of people go to college and party, but I think I had a really unique experience.
You know, I was kind of surprised when I found out that, like, when I first kind of like started to watch you on podcasts, watch your comedy and all that, and, you know, found out you were at Auburn, I was surprised to find, for some reason, I guess based on part of your personality or something, that you were not in a fraternity while you were at Auburn. But I guess you could say that the water polo team was kind of a fraternity in its own way.
Yeah, I mean, I was open to it. I didn't really know what a fraternity was.
Yeah.
And then I got up there and I was like, oh, I should check that out. And then I started hanging out with the water polo guys, and I'm like, these are my guys. This is who I'm going to hang out with, you know? Now, so when I would go back to Miami for summer, and Auburn was on the quarter system back then. So all my friends would go back to their schools, and Auburn didn't start for another like 2 weeks. So I was just home by myself. So I had a couple friends who went to University of Miami. So I'd go up and party with them, and Rush was always the first week, right? So I rushed fraternities at University of Miami my freshman and sophomore year.
That's funny.
And I would just make up fake names, and they'd be like, hey, let me introduce you to this girl, and here's a free beer, dude. Because they would try to recruit you. That was the week you wanted to go to the parties, right? Yeah. And then the second week they'd call you up and they'd be like, hey man, we really liked hanging out with you, like meeting you. We want you to come rush next week's Hell Week. And then I'm like, oh, I already flunked out of school. Like, you know, I'd make some story up.
You know, I actually was in a fraternity for 3 years when I was in school at the first school I went to, and I'm not the type of person to be in a fraternity, but it all depends on the school you go to and the group of people you meet, because like there are people who I've met that were in the same fraternity as my dad at Auburn. My dad was in Beta Theta Pi, which now is kicked off campus because of hazing and partying, but it all depends on like the school and when you went there, because when my dad was in Beta, they were, according to him, the nerds that had the best GPA on campus, and like, and then now they're the party school, you know, or party frat.
Yeah. Well, I had Beta guys running errands for me, as I told you already. So.
Yeah.
We used to go, look, man, growing up in Miami, like we'd go out on boats and stuff like that, but there was like, at Auburn, we'd go out into the woods in like Chihuahua Park, and we'd sneak in the back because it was closed at night. We'd have a backpack full of box wine, or we'd go out to there was a couple of old abandoned fire towers that we knew about. You go out there, so like stuff like country stuff like that, I was not used to. Like that was new to me, you know. Yeah. So that was always fun, and then sneaking booze into the football games was always an adventure as well, man. I mean, we went through phases of like what we get away with, and then they'd catch us, you know? Like, so, you know, we emptied saline solution bottles for like our contact lenses and filled that. And then we got a syringe and we started injecting fruit, and we're like, oh, I'm diabetic, I have to bring fruit in with me, you know? And then I got to the point where I just got really good at hiding a bag in my pants. I'd wear this real baggy, like orange pants, and then, you know, you just kind of like walk a certain way. And, that was always an ongoing battle.
This is a little ADD, which I feel like is a lot of this podcast. So I apologize. I'm kind of, I just want to mention one thing and then we can sign off. One of my I don't know why this one just like tickles my funny bone. One of my favorite stories that you've told, I don't know if you do this as a stand-up bit, but I think you talked about it on the Mermen. Your story about when I think you were at a Miami game and you were holding a sign that said, you can't spell Penn State without P-E-N-S.
Oh boy.
Because I don't know why, like when you told that story, I was like, that's one of the funnier stories I've heard you tell, you know?
I've told it on stage just as one-offs. I told it at Penn State, actually.
That's great.
But yeah, that was the only time my parents have ever visibly been embarrassed by me. But I was in Miami. I can't remember. I mean, I think I was still in school, but I was in Miami, and Miami was playing Penn State. Penn State was pretty good at the time. Miami was having some down years. And we painted our face and painted our bodies, and we started tailgating at like 8 a.m. for like a noon game. And yeah, I learned that you should not drink, then make your sign. You should make your sign when you're at home. Because I was trying to come up with something to write on the sign, and I don't know why I thought that was so funny, but I said, you can't spell penis without P-E-N, and then in like the little letters I finished Penn State or whatever, you know?
Yeah.
In my brain, I was Shakespeare. But now you look back at it and you're like, that doesn't make any sense. What are you talking about, you know? And so as we're going into the stadium, it started raining. So now we just looked really sad with like our paint running everywhere and gross. And my sign was all running. And I'm like, well, man, this fan base, like the rain really got them negged out. I gotta go rally the troops. So I went around the whole stadium, and in front of every section, I was like, penis, penis. and people were dying laughing and pointing at me, and I was just going section to section, and I finally went to one section, and I see people pointing at me. I look up, and I'm like, Mom and Dad? And they were some friends, and I went running up to give them a hug, and my mom's like, go away. And I'm like, I want to say hi to Joanna and Stewart, though. And she's like, go away. And I'm like, that's weird. Why don't they want to hang out with me? And yeah, it was bad. It was bad. I went back. There was this family sitting behind me, and I had my two friends with me, and they were both like my friends Kristen and Johnny, and they were both like passed out on my shoulders, and we're just sitting there, just drunk messes, man. And then this lady, like, she took her kids and went and moved away from us. Like,
that's when you know it's bad. One of the better signs, and I'll say this and then we'll wrap things up. One of the better signs I've seen. I love a hilarious sign like that at like a football game. But I don't know if you can really. It's mostly at tailgates now. But I saw one. You might not remember this, and I'll edit it in so you see the photo I'm talking about. Do you remember the malfunction that happened on iPhones back in like 20? It was during the last Iron Bowl that we won, I believe, which was like 2019 or something like that. There was a malfunction in the messaging app where anytime you tried to type just like the word I, like capital I, like I love sushi or something like that, it would be as like these weird characters. Just the word I was like messed up, and I saw this awesome sign where someone wrote those characters and then it said hate Bama, and it was like right when that was like a big thing, and I was like, I love a good comedian that like they could have wrote "I hate Bama" or something, but they made it into something hilarious. You know,
Dude, I'm telling you, that's why the world's such an interesting place, is that there's so many outlets for creativity and for smart jokes. That's why you get mad when there's dumb jokes out there, because you're just like, you're like, hey man, there's so many different platforms to figure out good funny stuff now. And College Game Day, I mean, yeah, dude, that's half the fun, is you see the funny signs that are behind them and see what the best ones.
Yeah. But anyway, let's wrap things up, I guess. I just wanted to kind of ask you, do you have anything you want to promote? I mean, podcasts, shows, this will be should be coming out on the 31st of March, so a week from today.
Hell yeah. Well, yeah, listen to the Mermen Podcast. It's definitely been a lot of fun doing that. If you like barbecue, I also have the Meet Dave podcast. That's MEAT. Happen to have my calendar right here, which all my dates are up at DaveWilliamsonComedy.com and my Instagram at DaveWComedy. You said this will be coming out at the beginning of April?
No, March 31st, so the last day of March.
All right, cool. If you live out in California, I'll be at the Ventura Harbor Comedy Club April 14th and 15th. But in May, I'm hitting the road hard. I'm going to be up in Louisville on May 4th. Indianapolis at Helium on the 5th and the 6th. St. Louis, I'm going to be at Helium there on May 7th. The rest of this year, I have dates all over the country. Chicago Improv at the end of June. That's in Schaumburg, really cool area of town. I'm going to be going to Grand Rapids up in Michigan. And me and Forrest are going to do a Mermen tour down through Florida, probably do Miami, Key West, maybe a couple other cities. I'm going to be in Vegas at the beginning of September, Boise, Idaho in October. Look at all these opportunities people have to come see me. And then I'm going to be up in Canada at the end of the year. And at some point, I'm hoping to add a Huntsville weekend. So for you Auburn people, maybe do a road trip. Come up. Let's hang out in Huntsville.
That sounds awesome, man. It was really nice, like I said, getting to meet you a couple of months ago and getting to kind of get some behind the scenes looks at, your comedy that I've been enjoying for the past few years, and getting to talk to someone that went to Auburn at a much different era than me is really cool. And yeah, man, thank you so much for your time, and thank you for all of your, comedic wisdom.
Yeah. Hell yeah, Peter. Well, listen, man, we're friends now, so reach out anytime, and I will see you in Auburn again. And keep
absolutely
doing what you're doing too, man. Keep leaning into the media and visual content, and doing podcasts, and never hesitate to reach out to someone that you think you can offer value to, because it might result in a friendship like we have now. So I look forward to more of it, buddy. War Eagle.
War Eagle, man. Thank you so much. Have a good night.
You got it, bud. All right, bud.